What's going on, guys? Billy here, and the DJI Mini 4 Pro is here with upgrades in all of the right places to make this a solid upgrade over the Mini 3 Pro. Now, I don't want to turn this into a comparison video because I want to keep it focused on the Mini 4 Pro, but to give you a quick rundown, the design is slightly different with upgraded obstacle avoidance sensors and front legs added for stability and to hide some new antennas. It has the upgraded O4 transmission system and is used with the new RC2 and RCN2 remote controllers. It has a new ActiveTrack system that gives us way more functionality, and even though the camera hardware is the same, the software has improved with higher dynamic range when shooting video, more frame rate options, and other shooting modes. So that's like a quick top-down look at everything that's new inside of the Mini 4 Pro, everything that's been upgraded from the Mini 3 Pro. But for now, I want to push the older drone to the side and just touch on the Mini 4 Pro here. Now, don't worry, in the coming days, I'll be making a full breakdown video, a full comparison video between the Mini 3 and the Mini 4 to help you decide if you should make the upgrade from your Mini 3 to this next generation drone. But for now, what I want to do is cover the Mini 4 Pro and everything that's new a little bit more in depth. So like most of my reviews, I want to break this into three different sections. First, talking about the aircraft, and then the camera, and then finally wrap up with some miscellaneous things and really cover some of the different tech and autonomy features like the intelligent flight modes that are built here into the Mini 4 Pro. I'm always amazed at how DJI can stuff more and more into these small drones, and this year, they've basically given us every little feature that we've come to expect from a higher end drone in their lineup. Like typically these smaller mini drones come with a set of trade-offs because the weight needs to stay under 250 grams. That is, after all, why the mini class of drones are so important and so popular. With this release though, the Mini 4 Pro has added a bunch of hardware features that we'd usually find in DJI's larger drones that can accommodate more weight and more space. Like the biggest upgrade that was added into this drone is the omnidirectional obstacle avoidance. So now we have two sensors facing forwards, two facing backwards, and two facing downwards. This means that the drone is looking for obstacles in every single direction. Now these sensors don't only let the drone see in more directions, but the actual camera hardware itself, like the actual sensors, have been upgraded as well, bringing it up to DJI's new standard they've set amongst their entire drone lineup. These new obstacle avoidance cameras have a higher resolution sensor and a wider field of view. Just comparing the camera hardware between the Mini 3 Pro and the Mini 4 Pro shows this difference pretty clearly. The layout of the cameras is the same, but because the cameras have that wider field of view, this same array can see to the side and above the drone. The older Mini 3 Pro was limited to just seeing forwards, backwards, and underneath of the drone. This was such a great upgrade for the Mini class of drones. If you remember, the Mini 2 had absolutely no obstacle avoidance, so jumping to the Mini 3 Pro that now had forwards, backwards, and downwards obstacle avoidance was such a huge win. I mean, think about it. The Mini 3 Pro would be purchased by a lot of beginners, so giving them that cushion of having obstacle avoidance was definitely a nice benefit. Although you couldn't see above or to the side of the drone, at least the drone couldn't see in those directions because it didn't have any of those sensors, so you still were vulnerable. And you know, I never thought I would see the day that a mini drone would have omnidirectional obstacle avoidance, but DJI did it here with the Mini 4 Pro, and I'm happy they did because, like, I love tracking objects from side to side, and it gives me such great peace of mind knowing that my obstacle avoidance sensors are there to cover me in areas where I might be flying blind. You know, funny enough, just the other week, I was up in British Columbia. To be specific, I was in Tofino, and the whole entire week, I was just chasing after surfers, skaters, chasing after boats, doing what I love to do most with my drone, which is find a moving subject and then chase after them. And unfortunately, when I was flying the Mini 4 Pro, I got a little bit too happy flying in sport mode, wasn't really aware of my surroundings, and put the drone right into a tree. Now, to elaborate on that story, I was in sport mode and I didn't have my obstacle avoidance sensors turned on. Of course, the maximum speed of the Mini 4 Pro here is about 36 miles an hour. So in order to keep up with the fast moving boat, I've got to keep the drone in sport mode, and I just totally didn't know that I was that close to the trees. So the drone flew sideways, hit the tree, fell down to the ground, and at that point, I'm kind of panicking because there's this huge cliffside. So I turned on the ESC beeping. I had one of my friends swim over to try and find the drone and listen for it. Luckily, she found it. It was sitting on a log. She picked the drone up, put it out over the water. I took off and flew the drone back to myself. It really was just an absolute perfect rescue, but I almost lost the drone because she said that it landed on the log, and it landed so perfectly on a flat section of the log that if it landed anywhere else, like an inch in any direction, it would have fallen right in the water. Okay, now before we get off of the topic of obstacle avoidance, I want to quickly mention that the upgraded hardware also unlocks more features outside of just obstacle avoidance, like a faster top speed and a new and improved ActiveTrack system, both of which we'll come back to very soon. Now, you also might have noticed when looking at the sensors underneath of the drone that we have a built-in auxiliary LED, which I was so surprised to see. This little light is great to use when flying in low light conditions so that you can spot it when flying and so that the downward sensors can see the ground better when landing. This is again something that I just never expected to see in a mini class of drone. Like, if you remember back to the original Mavic Mini, it was so stripped down. No sensors, no obstacle avoidance, no light, very small camera, right? Like, they were fighting for weight inside of that drone. And to see how far they've come now with the Mini 4 Pro, to give us the luxury of having an auxiliary LED really does show just how far DJI has come in upgrading this mini class of drone, because they've still been able to keep it under 250 grams, which is very impressive. Now, while we're under here, underneath of the drone, I've got to give a huge shout out to DJI for giving us these two little notches that make putting on the gimbal guard so easy. Like, this is by far the easiest gimbal guard I have ever put onto any drone. I never have to struggle or fight with it. So I've got to give a huge shout out to them because they have made my life so much easier. Now, there is one more notable design change that I want to point out, and that is those front legs. Yes, they are used for better stability when taking off and landing, but they actually serve a completely different function. This is where 2 of the 4 antennas are housed, which leads to a far better transmission experience. The quad antenna system means that this drone runs on the new 04 transmission system, which is DJI's flagship transmission system. And you know what's funny? We never complain about the range or the connectivity on these drones, but DJI keeps pushing the boundaries. They keep pushing the envelope year after year. Like, we could have stayed on 03 for the next couple of years. I don't think anybody would have complained, but here's DJI upgrading their transmission system. And I think it's a good thing that they continue to do this because it really is what separates their drone from the rest of the pack. It's what makes their drones, in my opinion, the easiest and best to fly. Like, of all the different drones available for purchase right now, some are fast, some take great photos, some can usually fly for a pretty long amount of time, but none of them, and I mean none of them, can come even close to the flight characteristics and the connectivity and transmission system of a DJI drone. This makes the overall experience of flying a drone just so much easier. You don't have to deal with any breakup or lag in the signal coming back to your controller. You just focus on putting the drone in the air, getting your photos and videos, landing, and getting what you need to done. And this is especially true for the Mini 4 Pro because it's got DJI's newest technology, so it is a great flyer. Like, it is one of the most flawless experiences in the air that I've had with a drone. Now, to wrap up our overview of the drone itself, the lights have been moved to the back arms of the drone. The rear of the drone is where the battery slides into place and is where the micro SD card slot and USB-C port is. And of course, we have our camera mounted on the front side of the drone with a ton of range of motion to look upwards and downwards. To further wrap up our discussions on the aircraft, I just want to touch on some notable specs of the Mini 4 Pro. I found it interesting that the estimated flight time slightly dropped this year, which I would assume is due to the new hardware added to the drone. This to me though isn't noticeable at all. The flight time is still crazy long no matter which battery you use on this drone, and I think the trade-off of having the new sensors and more power-intensive hardware is well worth it. Something else notable is that the Mini 4 Pro is now a little bit faster when flying in the normal mode with your sensors turned on. Now, just to clarify, the actual overall top speed of the drone hasn't improved. In sport mode, you still have a maximum speed of 36 miles an hour. It's using the same motors and it's got the same airframe as the Mini 3 Pro, but what's changed is a bump in the speed when you're flying in the normal mode. So now you can fly faster with the sensors activated to avoid obstacles because of that new camera hardware. It's also not only the horizontal speed, but also the vertical speed that improves as well. So the ascent and descent rate when in the normal mode with the sensors turned on. I really like this trend of DJI making all of their drones more powerful across the entire lineup. I've been waiting for a while for these drones to start flying more aggressively. Like, the Air 3 now having the ability to dive downwards at 22 miles an hour is just insane. It's almost like a controlled dive. Now, on the topic of the Air 3, the Mini 4 Pro has the same 04 transmission system that has an insane range of 12.5 miles or 20 kilometers. The reason I'm saying this is because when reviewing the Air 3, I took it out to the salt flats and was able to push the drone to just under 11 full miles or 57,000 feet. Now, this was done with a chase car as my visual observer, so I was able to fly one way and they could collect the drone on the ground for me, but really the limiter here was the battery life. Since the Mini 4 uses the same transmission system, you can expect the same great range and connection as the Air 3. So the drone itself is very familiar, but as the title states, has been upgraded in all of the right areas. The drone's autonomy is improved through better sensors, the light helps with nighttime flying, the antennas and new transmission help with improved range and connectivity even at closer distances. I mean, the Mini 3 Pro is already so good and the Mini 4 just improves upon that airframe. It's also worth mentioning that the Mini 4 Pro uses the DJI RC2 and the RCN2. This gives you the option of a controller that has a built-in screen or a less expensive option that uses your phone as the screen. I've gone over the differences between these remotes with built-in screens and remotes that rely on your phone screen so many times, but at the end of the day, it just comes down to what your personal preference is and how much you want to spend on your drone and remote combo. Now, personally, I always prefer to fly with a controller that has an integrated screen, and there's really two main reasons. The first of which is the brightness. So even though this is only 700 nits, it's not the absolute brightest screen in the world. If you fly with an iPhone, you know that the screen dims so fast when it gets hot, and it doesn't take much to heat that device up. So the great thing about having a built-in screen is it has a sustained brightness and really doesn't get all that hot. So you've got the same experience during your entire flight, and it's nice and bright. Also, it's integrated, right? So there's no notification spam, there's no texts, no emails, no phone calls. It is just meant for flying drones. Now, the RC2 might not be your jam. The RCN2 is still a great controller. It gives you great control and flight characteristics over the drone, and it's actually kind of preferred by some travelers because it's smaller, more compact, and doesn't have the screen built in, so you can throw it in your backpack and don't have to worry about scratching up the device. So even though it's personal preference, my personal preference is always to go with the controller that has the built-in screen. Okay, so now I want to move away from the drone itself to discuss the camera, and while we had a few significant changes that were made to the drone, the camera is very similar to the Mini 3 Pro, giving us a familiar shooting experience. The camera, of course, still rotates to shoot true vertical video. It has the same sensor. It still captures high-quality 4K video. It uses a quad-bear sensor to capture 48 megapixel still images. It can still digitally zoom when shooting video, and it has all the shooting modes that we're used to, like time shot, auto exposure bracketing, burst, and hyperlapse. There have been a few slight changes across some of the camera's functions that I'll highlight for you here on the screen, but the biggest changes come in the video department, with a bump in frame rate options when shooting in 4K and the ability to now record video in HLG and D-Log-M, whereas the Mini 3 Pro only gave us the normal profile and D-Cinelike. These new profiles, though, unlock 10-bit color and will give you slightly better dynamic range if you're someone that wants to spend the time color grading your video. So how about we get to some actual video clips, shall we? Most of what you're going to watch here is shots collected from Tofino in British Columbia, and I've also got some clips taken from the New Jersey area here close to my home. Now, if you know me, you know that with my drones, I pretty much always just film in the normal color profile. Because the sun is my main source of light, and because I'm obviously not playing with any light modifiers because this is a drone, I feel like it gives me everything that I need and I don't have to do too much work to the image. Now, one of the biggest gripes that I've had with the mini drones from DJI is that the videos just kind of have this look to them. It's like video captured on an iPhone. No matter how good the camera gets, you can just kind of tell when something was captured on a cell phone. The same is true on the Mini. Like when I refer back to shots from this same trip that I captured on my Mavic 3 Pro, the video quality just feels like it has so much more depth. The dynamic range is so much better, and when I'm editing my video, there's more room to push around the exposure and colors. Now, I've got to jump in here because I know that comparing DJI's lower-end entry-level drone to their highest-end foldable drone that they offer is unfair, right? We're comparing a drone that's under $1,000 to a drone that's over $2,000, and a camera that is 3 to 4 times as big on a drone that is much larger than the Mini 4 Pro. So comparing them is very unfair, but the point I'm trying to make is that with the Mini 4 Pro, we've actually got improved dynamic range over the Mini 3 Pro, which is great to see. Like take this shot, for example, of this townhome. The sun was in a really tough spot this morning, giving me a huge shadow draped across the entire front of the house, which makes this shot really tough to capture. In the moment when I was flying, I kind of just exposed for the highlights and hoped for the best, and to my surprise, lifting up the shadows and midtones in post really gave me a nice looking result. So if you want to put in the extra work, you can improve the dynamic range even more than it already has been. Now overall, I think that the video quality is great from this drone. It's super sharp, and being able to record in higher frame rates in 4K now allows you to slow down your video if you want, which was nice to use when I was out filming surfers and skaters in Canada. Of course, I also did some vertical shooting, which is nice to have in this camera for the social media videos that you're going to be shooting that'll live on Instagram and TikTok that favor vertical content. Now, where I think this camera really shines is for photos. Like I said, the videos just kind of have that look to them, but the photos have so much detail and room to edit them when you shoot in RAW, of course. Like I find myself always wanting to use the biggest and baddest drone when I'm shooting video because I like making dynamic moves and chasing after cars, so I tend to reach for my Mavic 3 Pro or my Air 3, but when it comes to a still photograph, that speed really doesn't matter at all. You just need to get the drone to a position in space and snap what you need. Now this collection of photos, again, it's from Tofino, all of which were captured in 48 megapixels, and some were even captured in portrait, which allowed me to use the full focal length and resolution of the camera. Even though drones are usually used to shoot landscapes, which look better horizontal or captured in landscape, there are some angles that just look better vertical, so being able to take portrait photos is really awesome. I'll leave a download link in the description if you want to download some of these images for yourself and play with them on your computer in their full resolution, because I know how YouTube loves to compress the hell out of these videos. So camera-wise, there really wasn't all that much to upgrade from the Mini 3 Pro in my opinion. I think it really did a great job at capturing high resolution photos, high resolution videos. I think my main complaint was the dynamic range, and they've addressed that. They haven't made it as good as the Mavic 3 Pro, but of course they're not going to make the Mini 4 Pro have the best dynamic range out of all the drones that they offer, because they still want to have the Mavic 3 Pro as the top dog, as the king, and it still is when it comes to dynamic range. But they made improvements, and I think that that is a step in the right direction. Okay, now moving on, let's discuss autonomy and intelligent flight modes, because this drone sure has a bunch of them. So now, just like all the other drones in DJI's lineup, the Mini 4 Pro has focus track, so ActiveTrack, point of interest, and spotlight, as well as some camera-specific flight modes like hyperlapse, master shots, and quick shots. What's also new for this drone though is waypoints and cruise control, and we've also got an upgraded version of ActiveTrack, which is really fun to use. Having all these flight modes in the Mini 4 Pro is a direct result of the upgraded camera hardware and the fact that it's omnidirectional, looking all around the drone. I mean, if you look at the Mini 3 Pro, we didn't have all the sensors that this drone had or the upgraded hardware, so we had a limited amount of flight modes to choose from, and even the Mini 3, the base version of this drone that had no sensors, had none of these flight modes. So not only did you lose the obstacle avoidance, but you lost all those great intelligent modes where the drone flew itself. Well, now the fact that we have this upgraded hardware means we have the upgraded suite of flight modes here in the Mini 4. So the first thing I really want to touch on is ActiveTrack, because this is really the biggest upgrade. We have a version of ActiveTrack in the Mini 4 Pro that does things that no other DJI drone can do. So we've had ActiveTrack in DJI drones for years now, and it's consistently gotten better as the obstacle avoidance has gotten better, but I don't think we've gotten this big of a jump from one version to another before. So this new version of ActiveTrack has a new feature called Touch Trace. You'll have to excuse the crappy conditions in this example here, but it has been non-stop raining in Philly, so this is the best example I could get, but it still shows this feature off really well. So ActiveTrack works as usual. You just drag a box over your subject, select ActiveTrack, and the drone assumes full control. Now we've got the option to choose either trace or parallel, but the one I'm most interested in is trace, as it gives us this new interface in the bottom left corner. To me, it kind of resembles the same location user interface that we have on the Mavic 3 series and Air 3 when using ActiveTrack, the one that sat right in the middle of the screen, but this one is far more powerful, as you can get a better understanding of which direction the drone is moving and where it thinks it is. You can also give it much better information in regard to which way you want it to move around the subject that it's tracking. Now remember, ActiveTrack is smart enough to know what it's tracking, so it knows if it's tracking a boat, it knows if it's tracking a human, it knows if it's tracking a car. It'll actually display right in the bottom of the box what it thinks it's tracking, and it gets it right like 99.9% of the time. But the reason that this is important is because depending on what you're tracking, different touch trace options become available. For example, when we're tracking a car, it gives us one layer of movement, so we can simply move the drone around the vehicle in space. If we instead started tracking a human at slower speeds, it now gives us the ability to not only change what position the Mini 4 is following us from, but we can also change the distance as well. This means that I can have it spin around me and increase its altitude up and away, giving me this very dynamic shot. I do find it to be a little bit annoying that as the drone comes to a stop, it kind of jerks around, but this is something that DJI could definitely fix with a software update in time. Now I tried confusing the drone as I walked around by switching positions and changing directions abruptly, and to my surprise, the Mini 4 did a really good job at adapting and understanding my change in direction and accommodating appropriately. It's also really nice to see the route in the bottom left corner, so which direction it's going to spin, so I know what types of moves the drone is thinking about making. Now here is my one gripe, and this has really been a gripe of mine with ActiveTrack for years. It's like, if I want to use this for action sports to track me while I'm snowboarding or skiing or while I'm on a bike or on a snowmobile, I have to actively have my remote controller in front of me to use it properly. Like in that example, I was just focusing on using ActiveTrack. I'm walking in a parking lot, I'm telling it what to do. I've got both hands on the controller. But if I was, say, skiing and I had poles in my hands and I had the controller, like what would I do with this, right? And now that we have this new touch trace feature, it requires so much more input. Like I need to take my finger and my hand and drag it around in the direction that I want it to go. And I don't have time to do that while I'm being tracked by my own drone. And also, I can't put my controller anywhere because I don't want to accidentally provide input on the screen or on the sticks. Like I was out in Moab, Utah riding dirt bikes and wanted my Air 3 to follow me. The ActiveTrack side of things worked really well, but I was left to try and hold my remote in my hand while riding, which was a horrible idea. A bike mount for the remote would have been helpful, but still would kind of be annoying. It would be nice if I could like lock the screen and the remote controller, just throw it inside of my backpack and not have to worry about the flight being affected in any way. Overall though, ActiveTrack has gotten very confident, like to the point where even in these dark and muggy conditions, it can maneuver around trees and keep up with my car. Like this maneuver right here, when it happened, had my jaw down the ground. I'm like, what is the drone doing? It shot up over the trees. It really was impressive. Now, even going through complex environments, it understands when things start to get too complicated and it comes to a stop. Now, you might see this as a downside, but I actually would prefer the drone to stay safe and within its limits rather than push itself past what it can do to ultimately crash trying to keep up with you. So ActiveTrack has seen a ton of improvements from drone release to drone release, and you can really tell that DJI is committed to making this feature better, which I think is awesome. It's a ton of fun, and I cannot wait to see where this technology is in 3 to 5 years from now. Now, the two final flight modes that I want to touch on here quickly are Waypoints and Cruise Control, which trickled their way down from the Mavic 3 series. These screen recordings were taken from the Air 3 just to kind of give you a heads up because I wasn't able to get good screen recordings with the Mini 4 in my review time, but just so that you're aware, the interface and workflow is exactly the same. Waypoints is great for setting up complex missions that you want to repeat. You can even tell the drone to capture photos, take videos, hover, and complete various other tasks for a very customizable flight experience. Cruise Control, on the other hand, is very simple and acts like you'd expect it to. When you're flying, you can have the drone continue to fly in your current movement without having to push on the sticks. This goes for flying in any direction from up, down, side to side, to forwards and backwards. You can even make the drone hold a rotation if you wanted to. I like to use this for flying from spot to spot without having to keep my stick pinned in one direction to do so. It just makes things really easy. Man, you know what? These drone reviews just seem to get longer and longer as DJI continues to pump more and more features into these drones, and as the lineup grows, there's just so much to cover to the point where these reviews are like probably 20 minutes long. I don't know how long I was in this video. Hopefully I was fairly short for you, but again, there's a lot to cover here for this brand new drone. The Mini series keeps pushing the envelope in terms of what it can do. I mean, the Mini 3 Pro was great. In my opinion, I didn't think it needed any upgrades. So the fact that they found areas to improve this drone really is impressive. And now it just makes me wonder, like, what else is in store for the Mini drones? Like, I know the Mini 4 Pro just came out, but in my opinion, it's kind of a smaller iterative upgrade. We've got a very familiar body style. I mean, the jump from Mini 2 to Mini 3 was insane. So now, like, what's in store for a Mini 4 to a Mini 5? Again, I'm always thinking ahead. I'm always thinking to the future, even though this drone just came out, but like, can we expect a larger sensor on the camera? That would be insane, but I am all for it. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on the Mini 4 Pro down the comments section below. And as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.